Hey guys, welcome to a new episode of Saw Something Scary. Hey man, I don't even know if I need to start it that way or not. Welcome to the 100th episode of Saw Something Scary. I'm your host, Derek Zoo. Alongside me, as always, is the Podfather himself, the man who runs 87 different podcasts every week that you should listen to all of them. The man, the myth, the legend, Jeff Wright. Jeff, what's going on, buddy? How are you? Happy centenarian anniversary, right?
Yeah, buddy. I am sitting in the same place where I first registered the Saw Something Scary domain name, my man. I remember, I think I registered the domain name and I sent you some concept art and I was like, we're going to do this podcast. And looky here, 100 episodes later, my man. Congrats to you too, buddy.
Oh, hey, thanks, man. I'm over here getting drunk on champagne right now. So
if I were a more thoughtful co-host, I would have sent you flowers, but you know me.
Hey, man, it's all good. I didn't do that either. So yeah, we'll meet up. I tell you what, man, we'll meet up sometime in the next couple weeks, and I'll try to bring like a crust pizza or something for us to partake in.
All right, I will try and track down like a 1 and a 00 candle, and we'll set it on there like a birthday cake.
Fantastic.
So,
yeah, man, go ahead.
I was just thinking about, nostalgia is thick in my office right now. And I was thinking about kind of the concept of this podcast where we had these kind of conversations and we thought, we should do this as a podcast. And when we got together, I thought, I think these things are interesting. I would listen to these conversations I'm having with Derek, so maybe other people will.
Yeah.
And, thankfully that held true and people have responded. But I guess I'm struck right now that we're doing an episode around a movie that our listeners picked. And so that conversation has expanded and in the best way possible. The tail's kind of wagging the dog, right? Like, we didn't know what would be worthy of a 100th episode feature, and our wonderful listeners, best listeners out of any podcast out there, they guided us well. So it's just, this is sappy and cliched, but we've come a long way, brother.
Yeah, man, we really have. Like, when we started this a little over 2 years ago, honestly, man, I didn't know who would listen or what kind of, fan base that we would get off this. I assumed that, just from me doing stand up and stuff, that some of my fan base would listen, and I knew some of like our close friends and stuff would listen. And I know that you're incredibly popular with your other podcasts, so I assumed that they would, you'd bring in some listeners from that too. But I had no idea the fan base, not only the fan base, but like the friends and almost familial thing that we've got going on now with the Facebook group, and with a lot of the listeners who've turned into good friends that I talk to, once a week or more and interact with on social media and stuff. So it's really cool to see how a concept that really struck itself from you were watching a scary movie by yourself in a movie theater several years ago, and I just text you and I was like, I'm going to get you through this. Let's go. Has developed into its own little universe.
Yeah, man, it's the best sort of, example of something spiraling out of your control, right? Like, there's a version of this that's just toxic and terrible. We went online and met by trolls and everything falls apart, but this is snowballed absolutely better than we could have ever dreamed. And I'm so thankful. It's great that I have a weekly appointment to catch up with my friend Derek, who, in a time in our lives where you're living in Missouri and I'm in Tennessee, I'm not sure that we would be doing that frequently. It's a way to redeem all the stinking time I put, in front of a TV with horror content running across my eyeballs.
Right. And
then, like you said, we just met the most incredible people in the world. So, hey guys, all of you listening, literally, I'm sure this sounds hokey and kind of like the thing you have to say on the 100th episode, but man, I legitimately mean it. Thank y'all so much. This is such a rewarding endeavor to give our time and energy to. So.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I couldn't agree more.
I'm just thankful.
Very much so. And can't wait to do the next 100 and see where this thing takes us from there. So
No pun intended, 100%.
Yeah. In a perfect world where we're doing our 200th episode in front of a packed out theater doing a live show.
Yeah, let's bring that on. Hey, I still have the dream of renting out some drive-in theaters and doing kind of a live show to drive-in. I'd love to do something like that. And you know what? Our hometown still has a functioning drive-in. So
that's right. I think we can make that happen. Speaking of which, if you'd like to subscribe to our Patreon, I like to be the person that brings everything back to money. So
we'll carry on by all means. Don't let me get away.
No, seriously though, thank you for listening. If you're a fan from the first episode, or if you just, I know that we got a big bunch of people that came in off of the Us episode, which I'm extremely thankful for. So if you've been with us for the whole run, or if you've just now getting with us or whatever, thank you for that. There are ways that you can help us grow the podcast even more. I know that we talk about this every week, but we still like to let it be known. You can rate, review, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, all sorts of stuff like that. Go to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review. That will help us with the algorithms that Apple does, which seemingly changes every day. But the more 5 stars we get, the higher up we go, and the more people will be able to check us out. So we would appreciate that. And then, of course, we do have a Patreon that we're still rocking and rolling with. As a matter of fact, we got to put up, I thought, a pretty fun little episode yesterday on Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, me too.
And so we're going to, maybe exploring the Shaun of the Dead or that trilogy further. And would love for you guys to be a part of that as well. And you can subscribe and get a free bonus episode. Well, I guess it's not free, but you get a bonus episode every month for as little as $3 a month. So we'd love for you to partner up with us on that.
For sure. And we're so thankful for everybody who already has. I mean, they're quite literally helping bring this episode to those who are listening. So thanks all the way around. It's just a blessing. I know I've said it already. I guess I'm stuck on a loop.
It's okay. It's, we're old men. It's sort of late at night. We can't hang like we used to. So.
What'd you say there, son?
There it is.
Here we go.
We like to, on our 100th episode, we like to introduce a new character. This is Grandpa Horror.
Even older Jeff. Yeah, there you go. Grandpa Horror, that's the right one.
Which is ironic that we're bringing Grandpa Horror in when we're reviewing a movie that's 35 years old.
Gee whiz, man. That's true, and it's the kind of truth I'm not comfortable with.
Sorry, I didn't mean to attack you right there.
Yeah, I feel vulnerable.
All right. Well, Jeff's triggered, but we're going to try to push through anyway, and we are going to go long form on the original A Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984. And man, I mean, you just ready? You ready to pull the string, do this thing?
Yeah, let's get into this. Can I find out at the beginning what your relationship is to this franchise? I think most people consider it part of the big three of slashers. So Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. Maybe start with maybe sort those out. What's your favorite, least favorite? How much do you love each one?
Okay, yeah. Sure, I'd be happy to do that. Before we go to that, though, 1, 2, Wahlberg's coming for you.
What? No. Spoiler alert.
All right. Now we're in spoiler territory. Thank you, Mark. Happy 100th to you as well. Man, if I'm going to rank them by big three, I think Halloween is my favorite. I think that probably Elm Street. You know what? No, actually, I'm going to go Jason. I'm going to go Friday the 13th 2 and Nightmare on Elm Street 3.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's where I land on it.
Just quick thoughts on why that sorts out that way?
Because I think, Halloween feels like let me see. I was going to say that Halloween feels like it takes itself more seriously than the other two, but there's also been some campy Halloween movies.
Sure.
But I don't know. I enjoy the Michael Myers character the most out of the three. And I enjoy Jason as well. And with Freddy, I mean, it's part of his charm, I understand. But like the sequels to Nightmare have always been real groan-inducing for me. Mm-hmm. Probably on another level, or even more so than the Friday the 13th and the Halloween movies. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah. So I think that's why I would put the three franchises that way. But I do love, I love the Freddy Krueger character, and I think that Robert Englund does a wonderful job with it.
I'm so glad for you to say that, because I've got a question about that very issue. Like, I think Freddy is super compelling, but I also think there may be a problem there. So anyway, okay. for later in the episode.
Okay.
I've got a theory. So I didn't spend a ton of time with Nightmare on Elm Street other than the third movie, which was called Dream Warriors. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you remember that one, but Nancy comes back and she's working with these troubled kids at some kind of mental health facility.
Okay.
You eventually find out is that they are the last descendants of the people who burn Fred Krueger alive, and he's come back for him.
Okay.
But Nancy's been to school and has found this person who can pull other people into her dreams. And so they go into the dreams and create these superhero versions of themselves to do battle against Freddy. And I bet you I watched that movie, before I turned 15, I bet I watched that movie 20 times because it was one of the few horror movies at Baines Grocery, which was right down the road from my house.
Yeah.
And I could go to those old-timey spinner racks and grab that VHS, right?
Right.
But for whatever reason, I just didn't spend a lot of time with Nightmare on Elm Street, the classic original movies. Mm-hmm. Other than Part 3, I've probably watched Freddy vs. Jason more than any other one.
Yeah.
And I'm super glad that our listeners picked this one for 100, not just because it's one of the OGs of the genre, but watching it now as an adult, I was really compelled by this film. Like, I found it pretty fascinating. And then when you start digging into it, doing some research, this is a movie that rewards digging into. And so, I don't know, I guess I'm probably a bigger fan today than I ever have been of the franchise. I'm going to throw a theory at you.
Okay. Well, hang on. Before you do that, I want to know your ranking of the three franchises.
Okay. Well, that would have been a different answer right before I hit play on the prep for this episode.
Okay.
I have spent more time with Friday the 13th than Nightmare on Elm Street for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. So if you'd asked me, I would have just looked back at like raw hours and said it's Halloween, which is the original Halloween's one of my favorite movies of all time. And then just by weight, Friday the 13th. But I have, I've moved Nightmare on Elm Street into second place, kind of like you were kind of kicking around earlier.
Yeah.
And I think the movie deserves to be, I don't know, it deserves to be seen as sort of the best inheritor of the whatever you want to call it, the slasher tradition that Halloween really popularized and kicked off right as the 80s was beginning. And that actually is a transition to the theory I want to give you. So
yes, sir.
When we talked about Friday the 13th, maybe on the Patreon episode, or I don't know, when we reviewed Halloween from 2018, we talked about how Friday the 13th takes what Halloween did and takes it in a dumber direction, right? So the creative minds behind Friday the 13th see Halloween and they think, oh, we know what to do. It's boobs and blood.
Right.
And, Halloween reduced to boobs and blood has carried that franchise. So it's not like there wasn't some pragmatic value to that. It's a dumber version. No offense, to the Friday the 13th lovers out there. It's just more simplified and whatever.
No offense to you dum-dums, but you know who you are.
Well, you're not dumb for liking it. It's just a dumber version of Halloween.
Right.
We can like dumb things.
Yeah, of course.
So I think I'm going to say that Nightmare on Elm Street is a more thoughtful version of what Halloween did. It's a smarter version.
Okay.
And that takes a lot for me to say because I like Halloween, the way the fat kid likes candy. So I guess it all comes down to Wes Craven. How much do you know about Wes Craven?
I don't think I can win any kind of trivia contest about the guy, but I know that he gave me the greatest cinematic masterpiece of all time, Scream 3. So
well done, sir. Yeah. So I knew he was a master of horror, and I knew that he gave us Freddy and he gave us Scream. But just kind of digging into who that guy was, one of the things that struck me that I didn't know, and I know a lot of the listeners here are out in advance of me, but just imagine if you're an expert on Friday the 13th and Wes Craven, imagine the fun of discovering it for the first time. That guy had undergraduate degrees in English and psychology from Wheaton College.
Yeah. Now, I when I was looking into this for the week, wasn't he like a teacher before he started, before this movie took off?
Yeah. So he, after those undergrad degrees, he goes and gets masters in philosophy and writing from Johns Hopkins. Then he starts teaching English at Westminster College and later at this institute that became Clarkson University. When you're looking at Wes Craven, I now get it. You're not looking at a guy who came in to say, how can I make a couple bucks off teenagers screaming?
Yeah.
This is a guy who deeply understood story and also had an expertise in the human mind. And the stuff he starts doing with Nightmare on Elm Street is it's really quite sophisticated. It makes sense that this is the product of a guy who, holds 4 different degrees in pretty diverse subjects or specialties. So, I knew Nightmare on Elm Street. I knew Scream. The Last House on the Left. The Hills Have Eyes, Swamp Thing, The Serpent and the Rainbow, and Jordan Peele's favorite, The People Under the Stairs, and then Vampire in Brooklyn. That's all from this guy's mind. And while they have common themes, don't get me wrong, you can see the family traits in them. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty diverse set of films to come out of this guy's head.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you a question. Did you like Vampire in Brooklyn?
You know, man, I probably haven't watched it since around the time it came out.
Yeah.
I guess I don't have a strong opinion on that. I definitely haven't liked it enough to watch it multiple times.
Sure.
Well, why'd you ask?
Because it's not a movie that you hear a lot about, but I just remember, I remember watching it as a kid and just cracking up because it was Eddie Murphy, but I also remember, like, there was a lot of stuff in it that my mom was like, you'll never watch this movie ever again.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would make sense. Well, it's funny you mention it that way because I talked about like family traits in the Wes Craven's universe or whatever, and that's kind of consistent for him, right?
Yeah.
Now, also just knowing more about his background, so he leaves academia and he becomes an anonymous porn director, which I had no idea about. In some interview, he said he made, quote, many hardcore R-rated film or X-rated films under pseudonyms. Can you imagine your English professor being like, guys, last day of class, got this new career I'm going to start. And he heads out to become a porn director.
First movie, The Hills Have Thighs.
Oh, man. Well, so he went on after, I guess, doing porn. I guess he learned filmmaking through pornography, however much that's possible. And
that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, he did The Last House on the Left, which is shockingly graphic. I was reading, it's actually on the Wikipedia page, that he basically thought that Last House on the Left wasn't going to be seen by very many people.
Okay.
And so when it gets a pretty wide release, it basically defined his career because people were like, you are a freak and away with you, beast. So, he tries to get out of horror, but nobody will work with him. And he finally gets back to The Hills Have Eyes and he's like, okay, this is what I do now. This is my life now.
Yeah.
So I say all that to kind of get to my earlier point about how Nightmare on Elm Street is a smarter version of what Halloween did. Mm-hmm. There's just several different things that the scares are rooted in here that I think linger with you more than just the guy in the hockey mask or the Captain Kirk mask showing up. So you've got this idea that the sins of the past continue to haunt you, and specifically that the children will bear the responsibility of the failures of the parents. Mm-hmm. And as that's playing out in this movie, it's just universally relatable. I know that's an 80s film, and I'm not quite a child of the 80s, but I know enough from my my memory of living in the 80s that I can recognize the elements. But like, what kid doesn't know the experience of looking at their parent rightly or wrongly and being like, you messed this up and you refuse to do anything about it?
Yeah.
Which is what's happening here. And in that way, I think Nightmare on Elm Street is going to be timeless. Man, I feel like I'm monologuing at you, man. I'm just really fired up for this.
No, you're fine, man. I'm letting you go. I think this is good stuff. So whatever you got, I'm on board for. I'll chime in if I feel like I'm confident enough to respond.
Okay, well, feel confident. I just think it's sinister that you've got this combination of the sins of the fathers, not just in the past, but now that they're refusing to deal with an unpleasant truth, and that's kind of universal. But then now as an adult, I watch this and I see it from a different angle in that, like, these parents had the best of intentions in what they were trying to do to protect their children, but it went horribly wrong. Yeah. And, like, I live in that fear every day. We think of childhood as so formative, and it is. I'm trying to do the best I can for my family. What happens if I screw them up terribly?
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the whole problem of trying to suppress the truth. You make a terrible choice. The consequences start coming home, and the way you deal with it is to suppress the truth
or self-medicate.
Yes, yeah.
That was the biggest thing that I picked up from this is, like, these are horrible parents because they're drunk most of the time, or they're non-existent most of the time,
or they're chasing dates and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I know that you and I grew up in a small town. But there's no way in this world that I think my mother would have let me stay over with with a bunch of girls and stuff.
Sure.
Like at the beginning of the movie, I just remember being like, I guess the 80s were a bunch of laid back people, and then when the dad gets upset about it, he's almost labeled as the a-hole who actually gives a crap,
Man, you're right. That is super weird. I was just listening to, fortuitously, a podcast that I listen to sometimes called Faculty of Horror, which I know a bunch of our listeners also listen to. They just released an episode on the first 3 episodes of Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, wow.
And so they were talking about the 80s, kind of setting up the cultural moment. And they have the memory I do that the 80s were sort of a conservative reaction against the 60s and 70s.
Right.
So everything gets a little bit more buttoned down and, it's just more of a conservative era. But the ethics of teenage sexuality and what parents were okay with, it does not match my recollection of growing up in small town Americana.
Right.
But your point about how the parents are just self-medicating. So thinking about that scenario I was setting up earlier where like the sins of the fathers are coming home to roost with the kids, but the parents aren't dealing with it. And so the kids are just left helpless before this vengeful entity who's taking the parents' debt out on the children. Mm-hmm. That scene right before Nancy's big play to draw Krueger out in the real world takes place is pretty much a perfect metaphor for the world of Nightmare on Elm Street. Mm-hmm. So Nancy's about to fight Freddy, but her mom, who literally created the problem of Freddy, is drowning her guilt in liquor, but has also put bars up around the house, which literally traps Nancy in this catastrophe that her mom created. But mom's there and doesn't give any help whatsoever because she's blasted.
Yeah.
It's again, with Craven as a storyteller, it's the perfect scene to encapsulate what's happening in this entire movie. And I guess I just felt super frustrated for Nancy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel super frustrated for Nancy. I'll tell you, the person I felt the most like empathy for, I think, was Glenn.
Okay.
Because, number one, like he's watching his girlfriend go through some really traumatic, crazy stuff.
Sure.
But then when he meets his ultimate demise, like his parents basically seal his doom when they won't let Nancy talk to him.
Yeah. Which is the solution, right? I mean,
right.
They all know that these kids are talking about elements from a real world thing they know about. But now we'll pretend like it's not happening and we'll blame it on the kids. It's pretty brutal.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the reason why I've been quiet so much is because I didn't really look at it from that perspective until you started your thesis. and I say that in like the most positive way possible. And so it's just been kind of like, it's weird to see the movie through that lens. And because I'll be honest with you, man, it's not that I had a hard time watching this movie, but again, it's one of those things where like, you and I watch so much horror content that when you see something that's 35 years old and looks 35 years old, it's hard to keep your attention. But now, after what you've said, like I kind of want to go back and watch it again and just really look at it as almost Craven's thesis on a broken home or what secrets can do to people's lives.
Dude, I just commend you to do that very thing. And I may be wrong. The listeners will be the judge of this, but I do think he's really dealing with like 80s dynamics.
Yeah.
That these people we've talked about some of this stuff before, but these parents all escaped to the suburbs, thought that was going to take away all the problems that they might face as a family. Turns out they took all their problems with them. And I mean, you've got it all here. You've got like fractured homes and parents who are substance abusers and people who are too broken to deal with the truth. I mean, I really do think it's kind of social commentary.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. And, it's almost fitting that Jordan Peele likes Wes Craven so much because it seems like that Wes Craven was sort of the, what's the word I'm looking for, precursor to what Peele's trying to do now with horror.
That is a brilliant point, man. That is exactly right. Like it's father and son.
Yeah.
What's the genre that they've sort of seen that's been ascribed to Peele? Is it social thriller? I can't remember the term.
Yeah, social thriller, I think is what they're trying to label his movies as. Well, at least they're trying to label Get Out as a social thriller.
Sure. Well, again, you look through the IMDb page on Wes Craven, and if not an earlier version, like a 1.0 version of that, you've at least got the root stock of what Peele is doing. And I hadn't thought about that till you just said it. I think that's spot on, man.
Yeah.
So not only do we have Craven to be thankful for, when it comes to Freddy and Scream, but also the genesis of Jordan Peele's work, which I think everybody knows you and I are deeply thankful for.
Yeah, he's okay.
He's all right. Yeah, he does some good stuff.
Yeah, that kid's got some chops. Hey, speaking of which, I hate to detour off this because this is really good stuff. But have you kept up with the Twilight Zone?
Dude, you got to forgive me. I feel like I need to turn in my Jordan Peele fan club card. No is the short answer. The long answer is my wife unexpectedly became super interested in the Umbrella Academy on Netflix.
Okay, yeah, we talked about that yesterday.
And so I'm happy to, but I'm trying to watch that through with her because she will also want to watch Twilight Zone with me.
Okay.
So I'm only 2 episodes in, but as soon as we're done with Umbrella Academy, I'm getting back to Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on the other episodes besides the comedian and the Adam Scott one.
Okay.
They haven't been as good as I wanted them to be.
Oh, no.
But again, it's one of those things that I think that I had to say about the first 2 episodes is this isn't a full on Jordan Peele, wrote and produced and direct type thing like Get Out and Us are.
Yeah.
So you got to look at it in a different lens.
Sure.
And they're good. The last 2 have been really strong, and probably because Greg Kinnear was in one, and oh man, what's the guy we like a lot? John Cho.
Oh yeah, baby.
Yeah, John Cho's in the most recent one.
Okay.
But there was a lot of pushback on the 3rd episode, which was called Replay, I believe. A lot of people felt like Peele was leaning into racial tensions too much.
Oh, okay.
Which, there's, feel however you want to feel on that. And I say that to the listeners as well. That's going to be a hot button topic for anybody. And I feel like that's something that smarter minds than ours should probably discuss. Sure. But, yeah, anyway, I would just be curious to see what your thoughts are on them. So on IMDb right now, the comedian is a 6.3. Actually, Nightmare at 30,000 feet is the highest rated one at 7.1. And then everything else rates around 5 and 6. So
okay, well, I will do my investigation and get back to you ASAP.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to ask you about that right in the middle of our discussion on Friday the 13th, but I've been wanting to talk to you about them and just haven't had the chance to bring them up. So,
well, no, that's a good sidebar for us because again, kind of digging into this franchise, trying to do my research. Do you remember a TV show called Freddy's Nightmares?
Yes,
it was
vaguely.
Episodic horror.
Yeah.
So Krueger was the host of this show, and it's these various tales for people who live in Springwood. It lasted for 2 seasons, 88 to 90. I just very, very vaguely have recollections of that. But if we're going to draw a line over here and say this line represents Wes Craven's creative career, and over here is his mental or intellectual offspring, Jordan Peele's, I'm not surprised to find that they're both in episodic horror.
Yeah.
And I'm now I've got the bug for A Nightmare on Elm Street, and so I'm probably going to try to track down Freddy's Nightmare somewhere and give that a watch some paper pushing day.
Sure.
But I guess back to the movie proper, Nightmare on Elm Street. To kind of get back into the scares of this thing, I also realized watching this that Freddy literalizes the I don't know if it's the thing we want out of a horror movie or the thing we dread, but everybody listening to this has had the experience of watching something super scary on a movie, going home and going to bed, and that stuff showing up in your dreams, right?
Sure.
And it seems as obvious as the nose on my face, but that's what Freddy is. He's a scary movie that's designed to show up in your dreams, but the motif is that he can actually kill you while you're there. Which I think, yet again, is a pretty brilliant storytelling stroke by old Wes Craven. I may start a Cookeville, Tennessee chapter of the Wes Craven fan club when we're done here.
Yeah, man. I wish you were still alive to come hang out and be a part of it.
Yeah. I just think with him, the hype is real and it's deserved.
Yeah.
I also think it's pretty crazy in terms of scares that he based this film series on some LA Times articles about these people who lived on the Asiatic Rim who were dying while they had nightmares. Did you see that?
I did, yeah.
I can't imagine being that parent running into the room because again, that's a universal experience, right? Trying to wake somebody up who's having a nightmare. I've done it with I used to wake my mom up. She would have night terrors. I'd wake her up. I've woken my wife up. She's woken me up. I woke my kids up. But just as you're watching it happen, they go still and die. I can't imagine anything much more horrifying.
Yeah.
So here's the too long didn't read version of this. Wes Craven's really good at making scary stuff. Who knew?
Yeah. You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah. Breaking news.
That Wes Craven kid, he's pretty good at this stuff. Yeah, it's, I always thought that it was ingenious to have a villain who is going to be able to not only manifest himself into the thing that you fear the most, but to also be able to physically kill you in that realm. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you grow up like we did watching these movies, somebody like Freddy's even more prevalent in your dreams. Because I remember, I don't know if this has ever happened to you or if it's ever happened to any of our listeners, but I vividly remember as a child having nightmares of Freddy, like trying to fight Freddy Krueger.
Sure.
And waking up being like, oh God, am I stabbed? Like, am I dead? What's going on? And, I remember one time that I don't even know why this is a memory that sticks in my head, but I guess it's just one of those, I don't want to say traumatic because I feel like that's hyperbolic at this point. But anyway, I'll tell the story. As a child and even as a grown man, I'm a huge professional wrestling fan. As a kid, I had a bunch of wrestling posters on my wall. And so one night I drift off to sleep and I had a big poster on my door of The Undertaker, which is exactly what you think that character is. It's an undead mortician. And I remember I woke up in the middle of the night and the poster started talking to me.
Oh my.
Yeah, like I could see the lips move and I could hear a faint voice. And I got up and walked like an idiot, got up and walked towards the poster, and Freddy jumps out of the poster, and like we have a tussle in my bedroom. And I woke up and immediately ripped the thing off the wall, off the door.
Not today, Freddy.
Yeah, I'm like, it's never happening again. So I always thought that it was clever to have that. But even now with the backstory that you've painted for us, it just seems like, it's the chestnut checkers thing that we always say about Jordan Peele, right? Mm-hmm. Like Craven was so far ahead of his time that he was using horror as, not only social commentary, but also as a mirror for us to see our greatest fears and regrets.
Well said, dude. And in what you're describing there, the conceit of Nightmare on Elm Street works like a house of mirrors, where you, I guess to make all things about Jordan Peele, like we saw in Us, you see your reflection in one mirror is refracted back, and eventually it looks like there's an infinite version of you. That actually is one of the scares in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. But just the idea, like what you described there about the situation with your poster and Freddy jumping out, mm-hmm. That could be a scene from a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, but it happened to you in real life.
Right.
And like all this stuff seems kind of cliche at this point because we are 35 years later or whatever. But like we've all had the experience of thinking we woke up from a dream, having something fantastical happen and realize, oh no, we're still in the dream. But in that moment, it's pretty terrifying. And then when you eventually do wake up, you're disoriented and you think, am I awake or am I still asleep? And that's the freaking thing that Craven is playing with because he has the characters go through that.
Yeah.
Where they think they've woken up, but they're still in the nightmare world that Freddy controls. That's the kind of thing that will literally wake you up in the middle of the night with cold sweats.
Yeah.
But you have provided an excellent transition to talk about Freddy himself. And I'd like to spend some time. I've even got some questions to throw at you about that.
Okay.
So just to catch everybody up, Craven has been pretty clear that he was bullied by a kid named Fred Krueger in school. And I believe it. In the last house on the left, the bad guy there is called Krug. And I just think this is Craven working through some stuff, or at least getting some measure of revenge on the Fred Krueger who bullied him. But he's created a masterpiece with this guy. So tell me if I'm wrong on this, Derek, okay? Mm-hmm. The thing that makes Freddy stand out is that he is the highest functioning villain among that group of like Michael and Jason. Maybe you pull Leatherface in. Those guys are, Michael, Jason, Leatherface, are either, we assume, mentally ill, mentally handicapped, some combination of the two. And they're just sort of engines of destruction that always move forward. But Freddy is this maniacal creative genius who's, he's not just hurting people. He's specifically planning it out and executing it so that he gets the maximum amount of enjoyment from it. Mm-hmm. And so while I don't feel like I'm more frightened by Freddy, I do think I'm frightened of him in a much different way. That make any sense, or do you think I'm drawing too many distinctions?
No, I think that makes total sense.
I think it helps that of course his face is frightening because it's all melty or whatever, but that we can see his face and that he is so theatrical with his gestures. Mm-hmm. You just get... It's a more, not to come back to the same thing I was saying earlier about the franchise itself, but he's just a more sophisticated kind of thing that we got initially with Michael, Jason, and Leatherface. He's a creative monster. Am I drinking too much Kool-Aid, or do you think he deserves to be praised that way?
No, I completely agree. And what's crazy to me is that the character, his backstory is he was a janitor, right? Mm-hmm. And obviously, depending on which iteration, since we're going with the 84, he was a child murderer. And the 2009, which I'd like to discuss with you on the back end of this, or whenever you feel necessary, the 2009 version, he's basically a child molester. Mm-hmm. And it's just crazy. It's crazy, I guess, that a janitor would have this much creativity in the afterworld. But he really does, man. He's the Bob Ross of destruction.
Wonderful comparison, and I wish that we could somehow trademark that.
Yeah.
We need to acquire the likenesses here, because these happy little trees and this this monster who makes your wall come out to eat you or whatever, or your bed, those things need to be combined somehow. We need a Bob Ross versus Freddy crossover movie, like Freddy versus Jason.
I'm in. Getting
the eternal positivity of Bob Ross for the demonic glee of Freddy Krueger.
Hey, Hollywood, cut the check. You think Peter, Paul, and Tony Shaker are listening? Maybe we can get them on board.
Yeah, for sure. That's your next project, fellas.
Yeah.
Well, again, there's just so much there with Freddy. So, yeah, we're talking about how he's a janitor, not a vocational line. No offense to any janitors out there. I think that's a dignified line of work that I'm very thankful for.
Yep.
But you don't think of them as being a wellspring of creativity.
Right.
But we do find out that Fred Krueger was at home in this demonic workshop making a razor glove.
Yeah.
So, still waters run deep, I guess.
Yeah, man. That's the backstory I want. I want Fred Krueger to be this unbelievably, I want him to be this unbelievably gifted artist who somehow had a string of bad luck and wound up being a janitor, but still decided to take his creativity and it's the evil Goodwill Hunting. Mm-hmm. That's what I want.
Yeah, I'd watch that for sure.
Yeah, and I'll be the Robin Williams character.
Speaking of backstory for this guy, again, in part 3, we get this twisted origin story where, I don't know if you're aware of this, but apparently Freddy's mom, Amanda, was a nun who got accidentally locked into the part of the mental health facility she served in over a Christmas holiday. And the part that she got locked into housed the most dangerous members of the community, and they spent the whole Christmas holiday beating her up and raping her. And when they finally come back after the holiday and they find her, she's nearly dead but also pregnant, and that child becomes Freddy Krueger.
Okay.
So they've explored that in the comic books some. Somebody who's read more of the comics than I have can tell me if they've developed that further, but that's the backstory to Freddy Krueger, I guess, and that's fine. I don't care one way or the other really about that, except that I do think it's probably better for him to be seen outwardly as just a harmless groundskeeper who has been pulling the wool over the eyes of the community and become a threat to their children. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably more interesting.
Yeah. Hey, did you, not to interrupt you, but did you know this about the Dream Warriors? So there's a dream sequence in it, where Dick Cavett is interviewing somebody. It's interrupted by Freddy Krueger, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so he's interviewing Zsa Zsa Gabor, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess Sally Kellerman was originally supposed to be the guest, but Cavett was allowed to pick the person that he would interview, and he picked Gabor because he thought she was the dumbest person he'd ever met in life, and he would never have her on his show in real life. And so if there was one person he'd want to see be killed by Freddy, it was Zsa Zsa Gabor.
That's kind of dark.
Yeah.
That's kind of dark. That's funny. No, I did not know that. I watched that scene not too long ago, and I thought it was a pretty cool little... It's kind of in the background of the movie.
Yeah.
Speaking of Freddy there, what is Freddy like as a dead guy? Is he a ghost, or has he become a demon, or what?
I think he's just Freddy. I don't know if there's a term for it.
Yeah.
I think he's just his own entity. He's his own monstrous spirit.
I guess that's as good an explanation as could be had. So again, Craven has created his own thing. He's sort of like Candyman or Bloody Mary, right?
Say it 2 more times.
But he's got a lot more agency than those creatures do. And the question came up in my mind because I guess I would have traditionally thought of him as a ghost. But there's this odd like connection to religious stuff with him.
Uh-huh.
Now, one of the coolest scenes in this movie is when they have Freddy stretching through the wall over, I guess, Nancy's bed.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know if you remember this. Right before that scene takes place, the cross drops off the wall above her bed.
Oh no, I didn't catch that.
And I just thought, like, that's a classic, a demon's here message in a horror movie, right? That's like a meme. Yeah. And then when you get to part 3, which I know we're supposed to be talking about the original, and I want to spend most of our time there, but by the time you get to part 3, they're going to do this like burial of Freddy's bones to try to remove him as whatever he is. And to pull it off and like bind him, they have to put a cross in with the bones. And I just thought, this movie almost seems a-religious. I just thought, like, is this just how we thought in the 80s about scary stuff? That anything scary that was supernatural had to be opposed to crucifixes and stuff? I don't know how to answer it. It just felt like a weird element.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's something that horror movies has always kind of played with, is religion. And, a lot of these monstrous spirits or monsters, whatever, are the ultimate evil. So what would you want to combat the ultimate evil with more than the ultimate good?
Yeah.
I think that, I think that if anyone was fighting an entity that, can possess your dreams and cause bodily harm or death to you, or any of the other, Michael, Jason, whatever, I think even the most jaded person might turn to, faith in a higher being at that point to try to help them out.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. That's certainly true. It is interesting that, in the dream world, anything can happen with Freddy, which is part of the fun of the franchise.
Right.
But that's kind of what they've done with him as a character. Like you said, he's not a ghost. He's not a demon. He's just Freddy.
Yeah.
He has his own rules. He even has his own place. His boiler room is hellish, but it's not hell.
Right.
And it's just Freddy's place.
It's home.
Sure. There you go, man. That's right. But to just connect it to the elements they're drawing on, so we just talked about the cross stuff. In the second one, he's able to possess a dude. And so he becomes like a demonic invading presence. He's Freddy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's probably smart, because if you try to put him in the box of something, he sort of loses his luster. Mm-hmm. It's just like the dream world, right? He can make anything happen in the dream world. Well, he should be able to make anything happen, period.
Sure.
So
I want to get to that question I alluded to earlier about whether or not there's a problem with Freddy.
Yeah. Again,
tell me if I'm wrong here, but part of the charm, and that I guess that feels weird saying it, but part of the charm of Freddy Krueger is that he is basically an id come to life. He's thrusting and licking and cackling, and he's just libido personified.
Mm-hmm.
But the fundamental thing about Freddy as a threat is that he's a rapist. So we've already talked about how he's a child abuser and a child murderer, at least in this first one. But he's also, he invades people's most private and vulnerable spaces. Your bedroom, your dreams, and even the state when you're supposed to be at rest and recuperating, that's where Freddy forces his way in. Does this make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So he's a rapist.
Yeah.
And that's what the question is his sexual aggression a problem? Because so much of the campy stuff that's been built in later films is sort of using that to charm the audience.
Mm.
It's funny when he's making dirty jokes in Freddy versus Jason, or if you don't think it's funny, and that's fine. I'm just saying, that's what they build Freddy.
That's what they're going for.
Yeah, his morbid appeal is that he is super sexualized.
Right.
But when you start pulling that thread, you end up with child rape and the way that he invades and brutalizes young women.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you feel icky watching a Freddy movie now?
Yeah, now I do. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Again, I guess that's stuff that you don't think about, or rather you didn't think about, which is probably a comment on society of itself, turning a blind eye to things that we shouldn't have been turning a blind eye to for a long time. And, now, like, and this isn't me mocking the Me Too movement or anything, but would a movie like this be made now with a monster or spirit, whatever you want to call Freddy, that is going to force his way into the most precious and intimate places of not only your body but your subconscious?
Yeah, and in this first movie, it's very much aimed specifically at young women. The men get killed, but they're collateral damage.
Yeah, they're not as tortured. They're not as taken apart as the women are.
Yeah, they're not as much the center of his attention.
Yeah.
I mean, even I know it's an iconic scene. I just hadn't thought about it. But the scene where Nancy's falling asleep in the bathtub and Krueger's hand comes out of the water between her knees and moves forward towards her.
I felt really weird watching that this morning.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, sensibilities change, I guess. But I also think it's an issue of, like, this first movie is straight up horror and Freddy's a bad guy. And, like, I don't think the original audience was rooting for him.
Sure. In
the way that more sophisticated horror fans, genre fans in like the 2000s started rooting for him, right?
Sure. Yeah. I see what you're saying.
So in this one, he's clearly a monster to be opposed and despised. He becomes something else later on. But the fact that this is where he got his start makes me just, I don't know. I kind of reevaluate all the other stuff. I'm not trying to be on any kind of moral high horse. It's just weird. It's just weird to be rooting on a child rapist and murderer.
Yeah.
Even if it's been 35 years since we talked about it.
Yeah, and not only that, but then to also later on, as the mythology grows, to be like, oh, Freddy. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that's just Freddy.
Yeah, the wacky uncle of the horror family.
Yeah.
I don't mean to pull the moral card. It's just something that came out of my mind while I was watching this. Like, now I feel conflicted.
Well, and that's something, I'm kind of glad you brought that up, because I remember watching the 2009 version with Jackie Earle Haley playing Freddy, who I thought did a decent job playing Freddy, but feeling really icky watching that movie.
And they dialed it up. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's clearly implied in this film that he was a child, not just a child murderer. I'll just leave it at that. Mm-hmm. But I was digging into this, and apparently right before this movie was coming together, there was a national news story about a series of daycares where children were systematically abused.
Yeah, I read that too.
And so they dialed it down and said just child murderer, because they didn't want to be seen as playing off of that story. Which, by the way, kudos to whoever made that decision to not exploit that real world awfulness.
Yeah.
And if anybody connected with making Slender Man is listening, shame on you. But having said that, I guess I kind of think it works better by it being, the concept works better with it being implied but not stated, because the whole problem is the parents did this awful thing in response, but nobody will talk about it either. Mm-hmm. And it kind of plays into the idea of there's some things you just can't tamp down. They're going to come out.
Sure.
Which even raises another question, and maybe just another opportunity to see how sophisticated Craven is as a storyteller. But you alluded to that little limerick we hear the children singing in this one. Mm-hmm. 1, 2, whatever. Nancy is repeating that to herself as she's falling asleep in the bathtub. Mm-hmm. So what that means is that got handed down to her as oral tradition from her community.
Yeah.
Well, where else could that be learned except from the people who are trying to tamp down the memory of Fred Krueger?
Yeah, I thought it was really weird that, like, after her first encounter, she knew that rhyme. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I mean, clearly this is something that has been taught in that suburban cul-de-sac.
Yeah, maybe the parents haven't hidden it away as much as they want everybody to think.
Yeah.
Because it's getting handed down from, like, playground to playground.
Or maybe that's how they deal with it, right? It's just an old wives' tale. It's just an old nursery rhyme.
Sure.
There's no truth to that at all. It's just something that we used to say as kids, and we're just going to play it like that.
Yeah, which is how myths get started, right?
Yeah.
That's a great point, Derek. Maybe that is a coping technique. That's really good. I'm going to go with that. That's good. Well, I know I kind of took us in a black direction thinking about Freddy as a character. I'll tell you one thing I don't have any problems with in this movie, and it's these practical effects. Did you see that? I guess it's Jim Doyle who did the effects for this, and he's the same guy who did Michael Jackson's Thriller. Mm-hmm. I did not know that.
Yeah.
And it makes sense why this is so awesome.
No Doyle rules.
Any particular highlights of the scenes in this movie? I've got a list of like my favorite parts, but I think like thinking about the practical effects is a good time to talk about favorite scenes.
I mean, I think the most iconic scene in this movie is Johnny Depp being drugged into the bed and the mountain of blood that splatters from there. I think that, to me, that's probably my favorite scene in the whole thing. Yeah, for me, that's the one that stands out. What do you got?
Well, I'm with you. Like, that's the one that's embedded in my memory. Mm-hmm. And it's the one that when I watched this as a kid, I mean, we've seen some crazy stuff by that part in the movie.
Yeah.
But that's the one in this film where I was just, my mind was completely blown away. I wonder if there's ever been a scene like that. It seems to make so much sense to use that as a horror move to suck a guy into the bed he's falling asleep on. Yeah. But dude, when it happened, even now, a guy who's just a couple years older than the movie, even now, it's just such a freaky visual. And it rightly deserves all the praise it gets. So yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, and now you go back and you look at it, and it also has a historical connotation to it because that's Johnny Depp's first real movie, and of course he's turned into one of the most prolific actors of our generation. So it's fun to see. It's fun to see Johnny Depp try to, I don't know if he's overacting in this, but he's definitely trying to figure out how to act in this movie. That's
true. And maybe this is me looking back with, retrospective clarity. But don't you think he's already on a different level than the rest of this cast?
Yeah, I mean, he is. He's head and shoulders above the rest of them. But, you're looking at a kid who is really, how should I put this? You know how you have your favorite pair of jeans, and the first time you put those jeans on, maybe they were a little too tight, or maybe they were a little, things were a little uncomfortable, but you saw how you looked in the jeans, or how you felt in the jeans, or how the jeans feel in general, and you're like, oh, these are my favorite jeans.
Sure.
I feel like that's Johnny Depp in this movie. Like, he's obviously very talented, but he's discovering his superpowers. Maybe that's a better analogy than blue jeans. Like he hasn't learned how to fly yet, but he's got X-ray vision.
Or he's leaping really far.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that grabbed me is there's a scene where his character's frightened by the can't remember the guy's name, but he's like the loser boyfriend.
Yeah, which before we get into that, have you read about that guy?
Well, the only thing I read about him is that he was apparently on some kind of drug when he did the jail scene.
Okay, I didn't know that.
You tell me yours and then I'll tell you mine. How about that?
Okay, so the guy's name now is like Jesu Gray or something. Okay, so his name now is Jesu Garcia, JSU Garcia, and he is a part of a cult basically now.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So
glad to hear things have worked out for him.
Yeah. So he was born as, I think his name was Nick Corey. And
I do know that because I watched an interview with him. So his agent was trying to sell him as an Italian and had renamed him Nick Corey.
Okay.
So the Jesu name is the birth name and Nick Corey is the stage name. I do know that much.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, because I know that the founder of this cult, he changed his name, so I just assumed that Jesu Garcia did the same thing.
Sure.
Okay, so this comes straight from his IMDb page. Jesu's biography is an interesting one, juxtaposing a life at the feet of a spiritual master against the backdrop of Hollywood. John Roger, or JR, as he is affectionately called, is a man who seems ordinary. JR, or John Roger, is the cult leader who passed away in 2008. A man who seems ordinary and yet is extraordinary to all those he's touched. He is also known as a mystical traveler, a sound current master, one who connects his students into the path of love, light, and sound. Jesu has dedicated his life to telling the story of this unique man who brought forth the universal teachings of love and forgiveness through humor and practical spirituality, and imparted the keys of soul transcendence to many.
Man, that sounds super culty.
Yeah, right? John Rogers' work continues from the spirit after his passing on October 22nd, 2014. So I apologize, not 2008, 2014. And Jesu celebrates JR's life and message through sharing the Mystical Traveler documentary. And there's more from there, but like...
Oh, my word.
Yeah, bro.
Oh, that poor dude. Oh gosh, that's sad. That's a tragedy.
And it just feels like the cult has run his entire IMDb page because all of his trivia has something to do with this thing, except for born on the same day as Elizabeth Shue.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What a nightmare. Anyway, no pun intended.
Yeah, I don't mean to drag us down that rabbit hole, but when I started doing some research on the actors and stuff from this movie, I was just like, what happened?
Something bad. Spoiler alert, something bad happened. So the part that I came across is that he gives this teary-eyed, he's in this teary-eyed scene with Nancy as she's like, did you kill her? He's like, no. And they're going back and forth the night that he's first arrested and imprisoned. Mm-hmm. And apparently in real life, he had been, shortly before that, he had been made homeless.
Oh.
And he said he was trying to kind of do what Nancy's mom is doing as a character. He was abusing some kind of substance between takes to kind of deal with the stress he was in. Mm-hmm. And so when he's doing that scene in the jail with Nancy, he's, again, bleary-eyed, and he just looks like his world's coming apart. And in this interview I was watching, it was kind of different shots of characters talking about their experience on the film. And the woman playing Nancy said, I just thought this was the acting moment of his career because he had so embodied the moment.
Yeah.
And then it cut over to him. He's like, yeah, dude, I'm really ashamed that my drug use affected my art, but I was baked or whatever.
Yeah. I'm tripping on goofballs.
Yeah. Gosh, that's just a sad story, man. I hate things going so sideways for that dude.
Yeah, well, luckily now he's part of something that transcends us all. So
yeah. I guess I sound super judgy, but everything you just described there sounded like the way religious figures manipulate people.
Yeah.
Well, so we started this off by talking about Johnny Depp's character getting drug into the bed. That one was more powerful for me personally, but I think the defining scene in this is Tina's death.
Okay, sure.
And that is a great moment in the film because it establishes the stakes and just how sadistic Freddy is and what his powers can mean.
And I hate to interrupt you on this, I'm sorry, but it just kind of hit me. That's also seemingly a Wes Craven trope, right? Because you expect Tina to be our protagonist through this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Everything's, the beginning of it is shot through like her perspective, and, her dream world is what we enter this crazy thing into. And then 15 minutes into the movie, she's dead.
It felt like, which by the way, that point is right on. That's a great storytelling okie doke to run on you. Mm-hmm. But it feels like the 15 minutes she's in this movie, 12 of them, she's rolling around the roof of her, or the ceiling of her bedroom, being torn to shreds.
That is true. I did watch that today and be like, holy smokes, man. How long are we going to take to kill this broad?
Yeah, and again, it reminds us that Freddy is actually a monster. He's not a guy to be laughed at or to begrudgingly root for. Mm-hmm. This is a young woman who he's brutalizing in the worst possible way.
Yeah. Both physically and emotionally.
Sure. And you saw, I guess, and I'm assuming our listeners know too, they built a whole rotating room for that. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's what they used when they did the Johnny Depp geyser of blood thing. They just turned the room upside down and poured a bunch of blood through it.
Yeah.
At the time, I read that, the budget went over pretty significantly. And there was even a 2-week period where nobody was getting paid because they weren't entirely sure that New Line or whatever could come through with the money. Whatever they paid for that movie and those special effects, every penny was well worth it.
Yeah, for sure.
Even the scene where she's running up the stairway and the stairway's melting under her. And I read that that's just pancake mix, that they cut a hole in the carpet and filled it with pancake mix. Dude, it is perfect. I mean, it makes me wish nobody did anything with CGI ever.
Yeah.
The only other scene I would highlight, and it's actually probably most frightening scene for me, like as a kid, I remember being really disturbed by it, is when Tina is confronting Freddy out in the alleyway, and you're starting to get a sense of just how sadistic he is and how much he enjoys toying with these people. But his arms stretch out across the alleyway. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, man.
And as an adult, I look at it and I'm like, that probably was a little bit too goofy. But as a kid, and even as an adult, I connect with that kid who saw that and I was like, all bets are off. The stakes on this thing, this guy can do anything.
Yeah. Do you know how they did that? That's another practical effect.
Oh, I don't know. No, I'd love to know though.
Okay. So they had men with fishing poles on either side of him operating a set of puppet arms that were attached to Robert Englund.
Well, it worked.
Yeah. So again, in a very let's go inside baseball that only like 3 people that are listening to this will hear, I'm hoping that Aaron Barlow got a production credit on that.
If nobody else gets that joke or likes it, I did.
Yeah. Some are just for you, Jeff. Some of these are just for the Jeff Wright Popsky. I'm all right with it.
Well, it sure did work for me. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back and watch the scene and see if I can see the wires.
Yeah. If it is Aaron, you won't be able to see him because he'll be naked with a camouflage paint all over him. So.
Yeah, I would rather see the wires.
That's as far in the weeds as I'll get on that.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of running to the end of the stuff I've got in my list here. We've not really talked about Robert Englund, but I think when we talk about Freddy, we are.
Sure.
It's a tribute to him, though, that when I think about facial expression and posture setting Freddy apart, it's actually his work I'm thinking about. And it is really unique, again, in the comparison to Michael Myers and all the people who've played Jason Voorhees or whatever. We don't get to swap him out with, for Freddy. Like, he is Freddy and Freddy is him.
Sure.
You had talked about the remake. I still today think if I were going to remake A Nightmare on Elm Street, Jackie Earle Haley would be the guy I would want to do it. But it's just not. It's not Robert Englund, right?
Yeah, it's not the same.
Do you think this movie could be remade?
Oh boy. I mean, it's possible. Especially right now in Hollywood, where there feels like there's no original ideas anymore outside of Jordan Peele. It's a possibility, but man, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to need to be retooled and recalibrated to be allowed and accepted in today's society. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I don't know if we need it, and obviously that's never stopped anybody from making a movie, especially a scary movie. But I don't know if we need Freddy in today's world. The world itself is so scary now. Let's keep our dreams to ourselves.
Well, that's eloquent, sir.
Thank you. That's all I got. I figured after the Aaron Barlow inside baseball, I needed to come back with something strong.
Yeah, you did. Congratulations.
Thank you.
If I put a gun to your head and said it's going to get remade, what do you do? What do you do with the casting for Freddy?
I mean, I think Jackie Earle Haley is an obvious choice, but what if you went a different direction with it? Like, I would love to see Woody Harrelson play Freddy Krueger.
To just make the cleanest break possible and just reimagine it?
Yeah. Or like a Tom Hardy play Freddy Krueger. Like somebody who can go to those crazy lengths and even those like overacting campy, the overacting campiness that we've seen. Tom does a wonderful job with that in Venom. And, I'd like to see something like that. But I think you have to retool the entire character. I think you take out the child rapist, maybe even the child murderer thing. Maybe it is a mythology and it's something like a Candyman that's come to life.
Well, I'm tracking with you. There's this rumor out there that Michael B. Jordan may be the next guy to play Superman. And whether or not you like that idea, that's certainly in vogue in Hollywood right now. to cut really hard against the grain, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought either do that, and you're going to like this. If you're going to make that hard, clean break, I actually thought about Sterling K. Brown.
Yeah. He was another guy I was thinking of too, but I feel like I used Sterling K. Brown a lot, so I didn't want to I didn't want to pull that card again.
I think he can go over the top, but remain sinister.
Yeah.
The other thing I think is that you may do something like what they did with the Solo movie with Alden Ehrenreich or whatever, or Ehrenreich, and just say, look, son, we need you to do an impression, and we're going to dial everything into, you're going to pretend to be Robert Englund. That's the other option you could do.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Last thing last. What'd you think about the ending?
I was okay with it until I read that it wasn't what Wes Craven wanted originally.
Okay.
And then reading his thoughts on it made me realize that his ending was probably the way to go. And I think that New Line made him change it, which really makes me mad.
Sure. I think basically he had to sell all his rights to get this movie made. Mm-hmm. And it's just a shame because it's a great movie. I kind of think the creator gets, morally the creator should have control, but particularly with the ending, I'm not where you are. I have always disliked that ending.
Yeah.
And when I found out that Wes Craven wanted something different, I was like, well, that makes a lot of sense. And I felt like validated.
Sure. Yeah. It's very ambiguous and almost like, I guess it, it leaves it open for more, but at the same time, like you almost need that cathartic happy ending by this point because you've seen so much terror in that movie.
Yes, and this is the catch-22 of capitalism and art. Like the reason we have a bunch of Freddy movies is that somebody out there thought they could make a bunch of money off of it, and so they were willing to keep pouring the initial investment in to get new opportunities to like draw money out of the franchise.
Yeah.
But this is clearly one of those times where the artist should have been allowed to do what he wanted and it would have been better.
Yeah, 100%.
It drives me crazy that when you get to part 3 of this franchise, Nancy just comes back. We're left at the end of the first one thinking, oh, Freddy got her in the end. Mm-hmm. And number 2 implies that because it says that girl whose family had to put bars on the door, I found her journal or whatever. Mm-hmm. Oh, I guess that means Nancy's dead. Because, a journal isn't the kind of thing you would imagine somebody leaves behind intentionally, right?
Right.
But then she just comes walking in the door as a well-educated young lady in part 3, and nobody says, hey, what happened when you drove off in the Freddy convertible?
Right.
I get why it's there, and like I said, it's a catch-22. I'm glad they made more movies, but I wish they'd have went with Craven.
Yeah, I do too.
Well, man, that's the end of my gushing about Nightmare on Elm Street. Anything we didn't get to that you wanted to cover?
No, man, I think that pretty much covers it. I will tell you this. I think that you've changed my mind on my rankings.
Yeah?
Yeah, I really do. And I think you've changed my mind on this overall. Not necessarily the overall movie, but I think on what I was going to score in the movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, if so, I'll consider that a job well done. I'm obviously I value your opinion and respect your perspective, and so if I've moved the needle a little bit for you, I'll wear that as a feather in the cap.
Yeah, for sure, man. Job well done on this one. You brought some of your best work to the 100th episode. Proud of you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So we need to do what we do, but since it is the 100th episode, mm-hmm. I'm gonna ask you what your least favorite movie we've covered so far is.
Okay.
And what you think an underrated gem is.
Okay.
Before we do that, did we? Actually, let's save it. Scale of 1 to 10. What would you rate Nightmare on Elm Street 1984?
7.5.
Yeah, we're mind melded again, man. That's exactly what I'd give this film.
Yeah, for sure. I think that I probably would have brought it in at like a 6.5 until this conversation. Yeah. And you've kind of made me go back and look at it for more than what I was looking at it to begin with. So I appreciate you giving me another perspective. And 7.5.
Okay. Well, I'm right there with you. I think this is just like, it's not top tier, but it's the next tier down. Mm-hmm. And it totally makes sense to me how this movie spawned an ongoing franchise.
Yeah, for sure.
Did we see something scary?
I think so. I definitely think so by 1984 standards. But I think even today, like the things that we've talked about, not necessarily just Freddy himself, but just like the effects that the parents left on the kids and, the scarring things that happen that way. Again, there's a lot of real life horror in this movie, not just because of a psychedelic demon that can kill you from your dreams.
Super well said, brother. The Jeff Wright who watched this in 89 or 90 was scared by it, and the Jeff Wright who watched it in 2019 was scared in different ways.
Sure.
All right. Well, Derek, the 100th episode review is in the can, my man.
Yeah, man. This was fun. I think this will be a good one for everybody.
Yeah. And a movie well deserving of that 100th episode pedestal.
Yeah, it's crazy that we went through 99.3 episodes and never did Nightmare on Elm Street. So I think it's almost fitting that we hit the final one of the trilogy of the Freddy, Jason, and Michael with Freddy. So good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And kudos to our Facebook group, people who voted it. Almost, Shaun of the Dead almost got the vote. So kudos to the ones of you who voted for this movie, and thank you for not only voting for it, but I forget who nominated it. But thank you for who you are. Thank you for nominating this movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Co-sign for sure. You've served us well and your fellow listeners.
Absolutely.
Derek, so most awful movie we've reviewed in these 100 episodes.
Whew. If I'm going, I think it has to come down to either Bye Bye Man or Incarnate.
Oh, going back to the very beginning, right?
Yeah. And I think if you go into my head, I'm going to say Bye Bye Man.
Now available to stream on Netflix.
Yeah.
Which you should not do.
No, under any circumstances.
All right. Well, I was thinking over the issue, and we've done a couple movies that I legit morally object to.
Right.
Murders in particular. But that's a different kind of question. So I'm going to climb off my high horse. I think the movie I have liked the least. Well, can I ask you to guess?
Tusk.
It's not Tusk.
Okay.
I get why you would guess that. I thought also Santa's Sleigh might be one that you would guess because I didn't sit in for the review on that one.
Mother.
Mother's up there.
Okay.
It's Southbound.
Oh.
Do you remember doing Southbound early on?
Man, vaguely.
That's why I picked it.
Was that the anthology one?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a terrible movie, and it's not even interesting in how bad it is.
Yeah.
It's just forgettable. So, like, if you think about Raw or even Puka, like Mother as well, there's indelible memories of those.
Sure.
Southbound was just a waste of time.
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually thinking about Southbound for the one that I like the least as well. So it really shouldn't surprise me that that's the one that you picked. I do know that you despise Mother on a nuclear level.
Sure.
But yeah, I think you're right on that. That one was a slog to get through. Yeah. And I some of these, like, obviously I've moved, I've been gone for the last year and a half. And so the original plan was most of the time we would watch the movies together and then record right after. And I think the only reason that I got through that movie is because you and I just took a massive dump on it while we were watching it.
Yeah, fun times. The only good thing about the movie. If I would have guessed yours, I would have guessed Strangers Pray at Night.
Yeah, that was up there. But I again, like what you said, there is some redeeming, I don't know if there's some redeeming quality in Pray at Night, but there are things that I remember about Pray at Night that I was like, okay, and I think had that not had the stranger's name attached to it, it would have been a decent horror movie.
Yeah, it's just such a complete rejection of what was special about the strangers that the association took it. Exactly.
Yeah. But for Bye Bye Man or Incarnate, I mean, again, thank goodness that you and I had private screenings to both of those so that we could rip them to shreds while we watched them, because my goodness, those were two horrible movies. Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I'm pretty sure Incarnate killed Aaron Eckhart's career.
Sadly so, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't even get to die a hero.
No, he just saw himself become the villain.
I was going to flip it to more positive to end the episode. So an underrated gem?
Man, let's see. An underrated gem out of the 100 episodes that we've done. I'm sorry. Give me just a second to kind of flip through my mental Rolodex here.
Yeah, take a moment.
You know what? I'll tell you the one that that jumps off the page for me is Happy Death Day.
Yeah, good choice.
Yeah.
That one's perfect because it's become a thing, but at the time, nobody knew what to expect, and we watched it because Allison clued us in, right? Right,
yeah. I mean, you and I think we had batted around watching it, but I remember being like a horror version of Groundhog Day. I think I'm out. And Allison kept. I don't know if she if she continually said watch Happy Death Day. But somehow we made an agreement. Oh, okay, I remember what happened. Allison live tweeted one of her first watchings of a Harry Potter movie, I think, and she said, "Okay, I did that for you, so you have to watch Happy Death Day." And I'm glad that we made that deal.
Yeah. So Allison is one of those aforementioned listeners we've met through our Facebook group, and don't tell her we said this, but it's just one of the awesome things that's come out of this podcast, right? Just, like you said, someone who became part of your life that otherwise wouldn't be, and you're thankful for their presence.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let me flip the script on you, Jeff, right?
Okay.
And ask you, out of the 100 movies that we've seen, well, you haven't said yours yet. I'm sorry. What would yours be?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go with Mama.
Okay.
And I think we talked about this when we reviewed the movie, but I remember when we watched that, I had seen it in the theaters and I hadn't revisited it, and I came away being like, this is a really solid horror movie. And I still don't think it gets the attention it deserves. And so, yeah, my underrated gem is Mama.
Okay. I would say outside of Happy Death Day, my other underrated gem that I think wound up being a really good movie, but was just totally off my radar and hit me by surprise, was The Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that I think both of us were like captivated by that thing.
Yeah.
Unexpectedly so.
Yeah.
And it holds up, man. I mean, new friend Meredith was saying on the Facebook group that she took our advice and watched it and was delighted. So.
Yeah, and then she watched something about Bob Carlyle or something, wasn't it?
Yes, Butterfly Kiss, which I'm thankful she put that recommendation in the Facebook group. I'd never heard of it. I'm down to watch it.
I'm actually looking forward to tracking that down. And speaking of which, thank you, Samuel Leskowski, for the Nightmare on Elm Street recommendation. So
good call.
He's the reason.
He's the nominator.
He's the nominator. So he's the reason why we did this thing today. So last question. Out of the 100, we've done over 100 now because we couldn't figure out the right one to do for the 100th episode. But over the span of the last 2 years, what is your favorite movie that we've covered?
And it has to be a movie?
No. What's your favorite thing that we've covered?
I think you will understand when I teeter between two choices.
Sabrina and Rosemary's Baby.
I mean, close, but just almost, just not quite there.
Puka and Mother.
Colder.
The Nun and Tusk.
Ice cold.
Hey, you remember we did Batman and Robin? That was a fun one.
Yeah, we did. It's a cartoon.
Yeah, golly. Joel Schumacher.
So here's the two sides of my teeter-totter.
All right, lay it on me.
Surprising no one. On one side, Get Out. Also surprising no one on the other side, The Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah, those are two good ones.
And I mean, that kind of hurts because I left out Halloween. We also covered The Dark Knight. Yeah. We've done The Exorcist. We've done The Strangers, A Quiet Place, Conjuring 2. Like, some of the movies that are most near and dear to my heart are right there, but it's Get Out and Haunting of Hill House for me. What about you? I'm
going to just definitively say Get Out. I mean, if we're going to lean into the genre, you know what we normally do. Thankfully we did that 10-year retrospective on The Dark Knight, and obviously that would be it for me. But out of the horror movies that we've reviewed, man, there's nothing. I don't think I've been that excited about a horror movie before Get Out, and I don't think I've ever seen something live up to the expectations that I'd set for horror like Get Out. And when we reviewed Us, I said I wasn't for sure which one I liked more. And I think with time to reflect and not have the recency bias, I think Get Out barely edges out Us. But yeah, man, I mean, Get Out is I don't think I've ever been as giddy coming out of a horror movie as I was with that, and couldn't wait to go back to see it again.
That's certainly true. And for those of you who may be thinking about joining in on the Patreon side, not to make everything an ad, but we just recently re-reviewed that one, and I enjoyed the re-review just as much as I did the initial gush fest over that gem that Jordan Peele just sprung on the world. Yeah, it was wonderful. And, I've said it before, and I think I even said it in the Patreon review. Like, I wish that movie would have come out now when we're more
more mature as reviewers than we were, where I was jumping off your couch like Tom Cruise on the Oprah Winfrey Show talking about the movie. So I'm glad that we got to go back and redo that one and give it the justice that it deserved.
Me too, buddy. So if my counting is correct, we have reviewed 106 movies over this run.
Ooh, boy.
And Derek, I'll just say it's been a fun ride, and here's to 106 more.
Yeah, buddy. Can't wait. Pumped about it. It's been really great. It's been, we talked about it up front, but it's been very rewarding to be able to do this for you guys. And we've tried our hardest to bring you guys great audio content every week. Sometimes that hasn't happened, but you guys have always been very patient and very rewarding. And, that Facebook group is one of the reasons why I'm on Facebook. And it's been great. And like Jeff said, man, can't wait for the next 106 and beyond. So, again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys so much for listening.
Couldn't agree more.
All right, man. Well, let's talk about the most important thing. What are we doing next week?
Yeah, there's not exactly a prime candidate sitting out there unless you've got something in mind. The Intruder is coming out this week,
okay,
which is like a home invasion deal, but
right with Dennis Quaid.
Yeah, I'm probably going to watch it. I just don't know if it doesn't thrill me in the way that I tend to be thrilled by the movie that we're going to review. So, do you have any nominations for yourself?
Man, I do actually.
All right.
Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile.
Yeah, baby. You know I love my true crime stuff.
That comes out Friday.
Yes, that's it. That gave me the thrill I was looking for.
Yes, sir. You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
So we'll do that. We've got Ma to look forward to at the end of this month.
Yes, Brightburn.
Yeah, Brightburn's coming out. So some good stuff headed your way. But yeah, we'll do that. That true crime one about that guy that I'm
Mr. Bundy.
Ted Bundy. Good night, man. I need to go to bed. Yeah, so we'll do the Ted Bundy movie. We'll start Zac Efron for next week, and we'll figure it out for the rest of the way.
Yes, sir.
Cool, man. Hey, bud. Happy 100.
You too, man.
It's been fun, and can't wait to see you in person and celebrate over some crust pizza.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Well, hey guys, if you want to get in on the conversation, you know where to find us. We're at We Saw Something Scary on Facebook, Scary Podcast on Twitter, and Saw Something Scary on Instagram. We have a Reddit subreddit called /r/Saw Something Scary. Make sure and check out Jeff's other podcasts that he does, the Shazam Cast and Pop Culture Coram Deo. Matter of fact, if any of you are comic book fans, Pop Culture Coram Deo, I think today released their take on the Avengers.
Yes, we did. Great movie. And really, you and I should talk about it on here. We spent quite a bit of time on superheroes as well. When we get back to our normal segments, we probably ought to make some time for Endgame. But so Pop Culture Coram Deo is a faith-based podcast that I do with a buddy of mine, and we gave Endgame a thorough analysis. If you're interested in listening to that,
absolutely. You can find him at Right Jeff. You can find me at Derek Zoo. And unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you guys again so much for the ride so far. We're far from done, and we can't wait to see what happens on this next 100. Until next week, for Jeff Wright, this is Derek Zoo reminding you to stay away from clowns in the sewers, white people with teacups, blind men with turkey basters. See you guys back here next week. Bye-bye, man.